Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Deciphering My Experience. My name is Eric, and we are coming to you live today on Deciphering.tv network. So please tune in for live content. It'll be coming out more regularly. But today, first and foremost, we have a very special guest, Brad Olsen, who I had the pleasure of meeting face-to-face in Las Vegas just about a month or so ago at a event called the 5D, I believe it was Disclosure and Consciousness. And it was run by Saeed David Farman. So he did a wonderful job getting some information out to everybody. And it was wonderful that he was able to help folks like Brad and I connect and meet. I met Brad and Tony Rodriguez out there, actually. So it was a wonderful convention of intellects gathering together about different topics. So I did have a blast. And Brad, thank you for coming to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric. And of course, we've been planning to do this since the conference and comparing our notes on Antarctica. As you know, your listeners obviously know you spent a year and a day at South Pole, and they may be interested to know that I spent 26 days on a sailboat going down to the Palmer Peninsula. So we were like kids in a candy store when we got a chance to hang out and meet and compare notes. And you brought some extra credit work that you showed me in a hotel room, and we found a pyramid and some cool stuff.
It's just wild.
Moment.
It was really amazing to me, this whole photograph situation. I'll give you the back end. Was, I was prepping for this trip, and I mean I have so much, I guess, artifacts and things like that, I guess you would say, available to me for Antarctica that I never really know exactly what's going to connect with someone. So I happen to have a roommate who also has tons of stuff from Antarctica, and I'm digging through things, and we have this one photograph that's massive. I mean, Brad, you saw this thing. I don't know that I've ever seen a larger panoramic photograph. This thing was the better part of 10 feet long, 12 feet long, but I just figured I would bring this and see what becomes of it. I rolled it out and went, wow, oh my God, there's so much to be seen here. Rolled it back up, brought it to Las Vegas, and then, you got it sideways. It's sideways.
Stupid camera.
Yeah, I know.
That's the long view.
Uh-huh. Well, let me see.
Here's the what I saw when I looked at it. I'm like, hey, there's a pyramid there.
Yep.
On your long roll up.
Yep.
Ever since I got this picture on my cell phone camera, well, I have included it in my Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica presentation next time I give that.
I'll have to get you a better shot of that.
Location with the pyramid. Right?
I have to get you a better shot of that then. I don't know how well it looks for you, but
it just doesn't translate well over my phone on this camera. But nevertheless, we were both quite shocked and amazed to see there it is, just pyramid. That's the only description they gave for it.
Yeah, it doesn't say Mount Pyramid or Pyramid Mountain like all the other pointy peaks in the picture are all titled appropriately. I mean, as you scan across the horizon, and I'm sure in your travels, Brad, that you've been to many a mountain peak, and I don't think they title them that way.
No.
So
we always have some kind of name.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that one of the three locations where pyramids are presumed to exist, the other that I talk about in my presentation, is in the Shackleton Range, closer to Western Antarctica. But there is one that is due south of New Zealand and in the zone that this photograph was taken. So there you go. I love it when dots connect.
Mm-hmm.
And this is such an elaborate puzzle when you put together everything that's going on in Antarctica, which, as we know, is in the news quite a bit lately. New findings, new discoveries, new people going down there like Klaus Schwab, instead of doing the World Economic Forum. He's going down to Antarctica, he said in his Twitter feed, as well as some other globalists. So wonder what they're going down there to do. What do you think, Eric?
I think there's so much shenanigans in Antarctica. I mean, like, Brad, I'm putting out proof, documents of real, tangible threats of nasty technology that's at South Pole right now. My concern is that things are so bad down there that all the information that we've been presented so far, I'm concerned, is just co-intel pro cover information. That's my concern, is that I don't discount all of the things that can be going on. I believe they all are going on, but I'm concerned that the vast majority of people discussing the ice are being misinformed or are in fact disinformationists themselves. I'm concerned because I've been there. You've been there. I have my experiences. I'm concerned that as I'm presenting facts, I get a response from society of people asking me to consider stories of people who haven't even been there. And it makes me wonder, are the roles reversed? Are they then turning to these other people that are supposed Antarctic researchers? Are they then saying, you should look into what Eric Hecker's saying? Because I don't seem to have any of these Antarctic researchers screaming from the mountaintops that they need to talk to me, or anyone else from the program that rotates out every season. I mean, there's a wealth of resource that these researchers seem to be missing the boat on.
Well, you're one of the few outspoken people who have worked at Pole for a year and is coming out with your findings and basically a tell-all in your presentation. Eric, you blew my mind when you told me the real reason for the ice cube experiments. Of course, I can only read the press releases and hear what the general object is to do that. But when you told me it was a variation of a HARP array, could be used in weather warfare, basically a force multiplier that has many functions.
Yes.
Of course, sure, it studies the atmosphere and everything else they say it does, but it has multiple functions. And that's what we see so much with the alphabet agencies. They'll tell you one little bit, like the HARP. Oh yeah, we study the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, but what else are you doing with that thing? So when you brought it out that the ice cube also has that capacity, I was just, wow.
Yeah, it's not just a passive receiver as they're presenting. It has the ability to transmit, and just that simple switch to that makes it a wholly different device.
Yeah.
You know, it's the difference between your radio and you can listen to music versus you have a radio and now you can broadcast to the world. They're two different systems.
Totally different systems. Yeah. And now we have news stories about Anita, which you also helped me understand. And a headline here, NASA just detected a parallel universe where time runs backwards after an experiment in Antarctica. I mean, how much more weird is this going to get, Eric?
Right. That's my whole point, Brad, is I think things are a lot more complex than we're being presented, and that even the stories of complexity are way below what's going on in reality. And I'm concerned that with the information that I'm putting out there, I mean, I believe this is this is global impacting information. You know, this isn't like corrupt U.S. government, corrupt, local politicians. This is global. This is on a grand scale of mind manipulation. And we're talking, earthquake generation. We're talking communications intergalactically. There's a lot of stuff going on down at the South Pole Station proper. And that's just a pinpoint on Antarctica. And as you know, Antarctica is massive.
Massive. So huge. Well, when I give my presentation and I show pyramids or New Schwabenland or far-flung areas, South Pole, to say, oh, did you go there? Didn't you go to all those places? I have to say, look, it's a vast continent. It's the fifth largest continent in the world. And it's also very expensive to travel from point A to point B. So when I say that I just went to the northern tip of Palmer Peninsula, and you've just been to McMurdo and South Pole, I mean, that right there is a big chunk of all that anybody will ever see of this continent. As I say in my presentation, if you wanted to hide out, let's say these globalists or even ETs, apart from the bottom of the ocean, Antarctica is the last unexplored territory on this planet. We really don't even know what's below the ice and what kind of atmospheres or climates may be created with all the geothermal activity. Antarctica is the most volcanic continent in the world. So the propensity for large under ice domes is not just speculation, it's reality. What's going on under there is the speculation.
One of the things that I do speculate on at the South Pole with the ice cube neutrino detector and the types of labor teams that I saw working there, and knowing that they were, steam drilling from top to what we were told was almost the bottom, where the ice met the land. And in hindsight now, I'm considering that they were potentially, I'm a tradesman. They could have just been easy, connecting the top to the bottom. There could have been a facility below in one of these ice caverns. And for the labor that we were doing, we certainly could have been breaching into something that was a vacuous space below and just simply been connecting or delivering things. I can't prove that one, but I can certainly speculate off of what I saw. It certainly seemed plausible.
Of course, I'm very interested in all things weird and wonderful about Antarctica. And one thing I did discover when I was down there, and I heard other scientists as well as the station chief at Palmer confirmed, that there is a big no-fly zone over a portion near the South Pole, not right where you were, because of course they still bring in planes and supplies on the cat tracks and so forth from the direction of McMurdo, but on the opposite side, at about the 89th degree parallel south, is where many whistleblowers who talked to Linda Moulton Howe, including this one guy, Brian S., who was very specific, and he was an airline pilot and can prove it down there, that there is this gaping hole, maybe 50, 100 miles from pole, not exactly sure, but about 1 degree away. And that's where Prince Harry went cross-country skiing with a bunch of his army buddies about 6-7 years ago, back in the first phase when all the famous names were going down there. Now we're going to have a new wave, including Klaus Schwab and some other globalists heading down to pole.
That's
or
wild.
wherever they go.
Maybe they're getting, I'm going to cross my fingers that they're getting like court-martialed or something.
Or maybe go in and never come out kind of thing. Or
yeah, maybe they're
going off planet.
Yeah, that would be nice. It'd be nice for everybody to have their freedom back again and not have all these globalist tyrants running around.
Send them down to Antarctica.
There you go.
Get rid of them.
Send them down and then just take their jackets. So now, when you were sailing down there, what would you say was, of all the facilities that you went to, the most rudimentary?
Well, 5 out of 6 of the stations we went to were all research and working bases. One of them was a museum, which was originally a British base that was tasked to spy upon the Germans during the New Schwabenland era. And they decommissioned it. They also decommissioned the Vernansky base, which is now run by the Ukrainians. So probably that one, just because it was old. It was an old base, and they bought it from the Brits for £1 English pound, which they have in the Faraday bar, which is the southernmost bar in the world. And we got to have a night playing pool and drinking at the Faraday bar, and they distill their own vodka there, like good Ukrainians would do. And also they let us use the sauna, and they turn it up really hot so that you have to run out and jump in the water. So we did a Arctic plunge there with the icebergs and penguins. So that was cool. And then they had another building that was also part of the original British base that is still abandoned. It's another museum piece, but this one's unique because you have to walk over a big glacier to get there. And then when you do, you just open the door and walk in. It's not even locked. And there's cans of food on the shelf from the 1940s and an old radio station. You can even sit at the desk and pretend that you're a radio operator. So things like that. And I know you went to visit Little America and Admiral Byrd. And oh, you didn't get there?
I did not do that. That was my roommate's photos.
Oh, okay.
At Scott's Hut.
Scott's Hut.
Yep. And that was, from what I understand, just like you said, it was just abandoned. And that's an expose of the harshness of the Antarctic continent, is that nothing really decomposes.
That's right.
It's almost 0% humidity. And in those temperatures and in that environment, things just remain.
They do. And germs and viruses cannot exist in that cold either. And I know one problem that they had with the New Schwabenland base is that after a period of time, the people would have no colds or any sort of airborne diseases. So when a new party came in with supplies, one person had a common cold and then everybody would get it. So in a way, the body starts to get used to that environment. And when then introduced to a virus or a germ, runs rampant throughout the colony and everybody gets it. Did you experience anything like that when you were at Pole for a year?
Absolutely. You're completely dead on accurate in these remote environments. I experienced it down at South Pole and also up here in the Arctic when I'm working remotely as well. But you're right. Down at South Pole, I mean, it was sterile.
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's no dirt. There's nothing. It's just completely sterile of anything. And you're right. Somebody would come in with something. It would tear through the facility in a few days. Everyone would get screwed up. And we would just call it the crud. You know, everybody will get warned that the crud is in the station. And so, you know, where's so-and-so? They got the crud.
That's a good name. And I knew about you from your videos. I saw a couple of your interviews before and some of your stories of being down there during the 4 months of total darkness. Like, how did you stay, how'd you keep it together, baby?
That was, well, we were actually, there's a lot of training that goes on before we went down there. And these were things that were discussed because this is the reality of the winter season. It's a lack of sensory input that's really challenging for people to understand contemporarily. I mean, seriously, it's the South Pole. There's nothing there. There's 49 people in total and a view of the sky, which was freakishly gorgeous. We would have regular satellite passes that when a satellite went by, we were afforded a short window of internet connectivity, which was prioritized for the movement of information for science. So there was no live video chats. We weren't allowed. I mean, just because of bandwidth restrictions and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there was other subterfuge in there that they certainly didn't want us having real-time live access to the outside world. That was apparent. But they didn't word it that way, you know. But the lack of input, we didn't have television. We had nothing. You know, yes, we had DVDs. We have the world's largest collection of beta cassettes at the South Pole Station, and there's phenomenal stuff on there. But they would have there's a company store, and it was, you know, open during the day a little bit and during the evening a little bit. And that was like what you would do. Like the store's open, you'd go like meander through the aisles and be like, oh, I'm going to mail a shot glass to someone when the planes come in 8 months. So it was just like you did your best to try to pretend you were in a functioning society. You know, you had breakfast, you had lunch, you had dinner, and you had friends, you had enemies. I mean, that's life. It happens. It's a microcosm. And it just became everybody working together to use the skills that we were trained on. I think it was Dr. Nicoletti. He's a highfalutin psychiatrist. He was the shrink for the Denver Broncos and, you know, a bunch of police brutality units or something like that, I think. But regardless, he trained us on how to look for folks' changes, you know, to become very aware of people. And we did. The crew that I stayed a year with at South Pole, I mean, I know those people inside and out. It got to be that, somebody could be 50 yards down the hallway around the corner and you can hear someone breathing and know exactly who it is. There's not a lot of details in that environment. So you just become acclimated to every nuance that exists, which is just the people around you. Everyone becomes a show. Everyone becomes a conversation, and the facility is aware of it. The program's aware of it. They have winter over studies. They do a psych evaluation before you go down there, which is just, they claim is to see if you're, capable of handling it. There's no test to see if you're capable of handling a winter at South Pole. There's no, if you haven't done it, how do you test for it? So they're just getting a base reference, and we learned that going through the program because they continue to, test along the way. But it's really, they're doing other projects on us, is what it seems like. There was a locked bookcase in the library at South Pole that you can just go to HR and get a key. Most people just weren't aware of that, but they were locked just for whatever reason, and you can access them. But they had some wonderful, wonderful books in there that only exist at the South Pole Station, and they were fun. But in there, they also had from 1957 to 1994, which I always think is funny because 1994 was a transitional year in the intelligence community. I have yet to figure out why. But something changed in 1994. But in that bookcase at South Pole, they have the winter over psychological studies from 1957 to 1994, and I went through those, and it was hilarious because then I started messing with the gal that was in HR, because I started realizing that a lot of what we were going through in our winter season was obviously predetermined because it matched what was going on in these other studies. And
how many people were freaking out, or how many aliens, like the movie The Thing, on other bases?
Yep. Yeah, so it was a lot of what they would call winter over syndrome would be what would be the end result of people not cutting the muster, so to say. And winter over syndrome usually occurred when folks who in their regular waking state, in their real world environment, had a lot of control over a lot of details in their life. And then now you bring them to the South Pole and they don't have enough things to control. And they start to freak out a bunch. So we had some folks that had better days than others, and we had some folks that I think suffered heartily from winter over syndrome.
Did anybody ever have to be put in a cell or restrained in any way? No freakouts like that.
We had a massive freak out, is my understanding. We had our winter site manager, I believe in hindsight, was suffering from winter over syndrome severely. She was she had made the news back in 2011. This is all referenceable. Renee Nicole Dusseur was our winter site manager, and she was either negatively impacted by the directed energy weapons system that we were riding atop of, or was suffering some sort of winter over syndrome, is my belief. She presented at the time, I think she believed she had a stroke and was looking for a medical evac. She had contacted the mass media at the time and was looking to get evacuated. And this was all over the news. And they, of course, they call her, a scientist at the South Pole needs rescue. They call everyone at the South Pole a scientist. I was a plumber. They call me a scientist. Guess what I was studying?
Plumbing science.
Plumbing science, yeah. But regardless, she was calling for a medical evac, and I do believe that she thought she'd had a stroke. But in hindsight, she was hurt by something or confused. But I don't think that she had a stroke. But in her chaos, she wound up getting drugged. She was decommissioned. She got decommissioned. Somebody else got put in charge. And that's how that went down.
They just got her out when they could.
It was my understanding that there was a firearm somewhere in the facility. Perchance it may be needed. It was also my understanding that she was the only one with the key.
Oh.
So there was a couple of days of her in her own chaos where we were like pretty much sprinting from room to room because we weren't 100% sure exactly what was going on.
Wow. We heard the story at, I think it was the Chilean Gonzalez base, that in the 1980s, there was a doctor on the base, and he was told, well, you're gonna winter over. This is the last boat leaving, and we'll see you in a half a year or so. And he was not pleased with that. So while the boat was still in range, he lit the base on fire because he did not want to stay that bad. And so when we got to the Palmer base, the American Palmer base, I asked the station chief, why are all the buildings separate? And they said, in case one of them catches on fire, it won't take down the whole base.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they learned a little lesson from that Chilean doctor that don't put all your eggs in one basket.
As soon as you said that, that story rung a bell. I think I did hear that before. Yeah. That is
people
funny.
People go to great lengths to get off.
There's quite a few folks that have landed at South Pole, and as soon as their foot hit the ice, they went right back on the plane.
Wow.
It happens. Yep. Some folks, it's not what they realized. It's the term there is it's a harsh fucking continent, and that is an understatement. I mean, as you saw, I mean, I'm not trying to discount you, but just reality is you made it to the perimeter and you saw how hard it is.
Oh yeah.
Antarctica is hard. It just gets harder and harder, you know.
Antarctica will kill you.
Yeah, they say when you go beyond 60 degrees south, there's no law. When you go beyond 70 degrees, there's no hope. And when you go beyond 80 degrees, there's no God. That's what they say.
And you made it there.
Yeah, I
tell the tale.
I stayed at 90 for a year, and at 90 degrees south, we would always jokingly say, it's not quite hell, but you could see it. It's right over there.
Well, didn't you see the Southern Lights, the Aurora Australis?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah, the Aurora Australis was on fire my winter season. It was actually a huge, energetic season. We were very lucky. There was a time, this was great. So we have these, we call it the logistics arch and the fuel arch, which are these, they're these arches, they're, interestingly enough, they're constructed in the exact same way that tunnels are in Operation Iceworm in Greenland, where they had the underground nukes. What a coincidence. Our arch is being built the same exact way. They would never have anything nuclear at the South Pole, I gather, Brad, but you never know. But our arches, regardless, one day were very covered with snow cornices off the edges, and they could have fallen off, and I mean, they were huge. They could have crushed someone to death. So we had to, you know, here's a work order. We're going to go get the snow cornices off the ice tunnels. And what we basically did was we took a huge rope and tied knots in it along the length of the rope, and we were using that like a sawing technique to cut the cornices off. Some folks up top, some folks on the bottom. And in the process of doing this task, and the crew that we had outside in the middle of, you know, nighttime at South Pole, it was a beautifully clear day. Stars galore. It's really hard to describe the beauty of night and winter at Pole. And all of a sudden, you could hear the sizzling. There's like this noise that fills the air, because it's there's no noise at the South Pole. I mean, it's quiet when you're outside. There's nothing going on if there's nothing going on. You can hear your blood circulating through your veins. It's so quiet. So now all of a sudden, when the auroras fire up, it's noise, like you hear it going on. And we looked up, and above our heads was a complete ring of green aurora. And it was like in one direction. It was like, we were calling it charging up. It was like on one side of the circle, you could see a bunch of, like, it looked like it was like increasing the volume of the aurora. Like there was more green coming in, and the diameter and the rate of speed was growing and billowing and getting faster. And it would charge up for a while, like this inlet side opened, and then the inlet would like close, and the aurora would be in this fury. And then after it was doing that for a while, all of a sudden 180 degrees from where the inlet side was, there was like this outlet that would open, and it would like discharge all of this fury. And it just kept doing this. So we stopped our work and we laid down on our backs on the ice, and we were just looking up at this, like as it was cycling through it for a while. And we were just like, ooh, look, it's charging up again, holy cow, it's doing it again, and it was a sight to see.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in your year down there, did any historic figures, celebrities, anyone famous come through that you know of?
Yes, I got a photo with the Herminator when it was New Year's Eve. There was an Austrian Olympian. He's got like 8 gold medals or something like that. And he skied into South Pole, and there was this faction of folks at this camp, like, further, a little further away from our facility. And on New Year's Eve, so it was, I guess, 2010 going into 2011, we went over to their camp. It was against the rules. We were not supposed to be over there. And we went there anyhow, and we had a New Year's Eve party with all these folks that were camping at Pole. We brought them booze, and they didn't have, they certainly were not hauling liquor in. So we brought stuff over to them. We had one of our crews had created a nice ice luge. So we had to, pour the booze in the top, and it spiraled through this big old hunk of ice. And we were just, partying with the camp folk.
Did you guys harvest the blue ice from a glacier?
We got it from down below, actually. So 2,000 feet down, where the drillers went all the way down to the bottom, basically. They would pull up ice chunks for us to put in our cocktails. And it was blue, like glacier ice, but more of a clear blue than like the glacier ice I've seen is you can't really see through it. The stuff that we had was like a clear blue, and it was so dense you could put a chunk like the size of a mouse or something in a big mug, and it would stay frozen like all night long. Like you wouldn't have to need another ice cube. You just keep pouring your drink in it, and every now and then it would calve. It was the weirdest thing, and it was unbelievable how loud your ice cube could be, because it's such dense ice that when it's popping apart, it would sound like a decent sized explosion in your glass. Like you hear like, you're like, whoa.
Did it pop at all? Because that's what it did for us when we were at the Arktowski base.
It didn't do it so fast. It would do it like in spurts. Like for a while, it would be like nothing going on in the glass, and then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, there'd be like an activity, a burst. And they called it Christ ice because they said it was from, it would have been formed back when Christ was around. Which,
right. And
which is interesting, though, because even now, with that being said, that's only 2,000 years ago.
Gets older.
Well, we were all the way down. So according to these folks, they were stating that this ice was created 2,000 years ago, but only 2,000 years. And this is one of my points of contention about Greenland as well. And a lot of the global science about global warming and all that shenanigans, I think we've been very much lied to about the rate at which snow accretes. Everybody's talking about how a glacier recedes. Let's discuss the math on how fast they grow, folks.
Good point.
No one's talking about that, and I think they're lying about the true numbers on this. I think snow and ice can accumulate much faster than we've been told. So things like the map of Piri Reis would be truer.
That it could collect and then cover up these islands. Because down in Palmer, they were telling us the story of an island that had just been discovered a few years before. And the nickname was Pie Island because it was discovered on Pi Day, which I guess is a date in the month of March. And it was at that time that there was an ice bridge that connected over to Anvers Island, where the Palmer base was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even a painting from the 1980s in the galley at Palmer. And the station chief says, take a picture of that. I'm going to tell you an interesting story later. And then so when we went outside, he said, see that island offshore there? He goes, we didn't even know that existed until a few years ago. So when the ice receded in this particular area, it revealed this brand new island. In fact, they didn't even know that their old Palmer base was also on another island until that ice bridge collapsed. they always assumed it had been just part of Anvers Island stretching around, but they were actually all little islands there.
Hmm.
So again, the Piri Reis map, which I show in my presentation, may have a lot more clues as to what's under the ice than we're
Absolutely.
being told. But you know, Antarctica is a desert continent, and it receives the smallest amount of precipitation, and it's the highest elevation because of the polar plateau. And where you were at was about 2 miles above sea level. Did it
Yes.
ever snow, or did you have accumulation events too often, or was it really dry there?
It was where I was at. South Pole Station is 0% humidity, and that
Wow.
is hard on the body. It is
Because
also lacking oxygen because of the altitude. So we would have tested our O2 would have been under 80%, which is taxing beyond. I mean, it's like trying to breathe through a straw. Do all of your activity, but do it through a straw. That's,
wow.
you know, and you have to get
Isn't
acclimated to that.
static electricity a big problem down there?
Yes, well, yes, static electricity is off the wall, like literally and figuratively. So if we were buddies down there, Brad, you'd have to watch out because I was a Sith Lord down there. You could walk down the hallways and you'd be setting people up all the time. You walk down the hallways, you run your hand along the wall as you're walking down the hallway, and you're building up a static discharge. Just straight up. And as if I hear you breathing around the corner, you're doing something, I'll be walking down the hallway. I'll be loading up. When I turn that corner, I will take my hand off of the wall, and all I have to do is aim it at you, and I can zap you. I could do like a 1 foot shot. As I'm reaching towards you, it'll just zap and hit you. And we would do that to each other all the time. Everybody was getting,
touch.
you get zapped constantly. You almost get shell shocked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you're constantly getting shocked down there from just static electricity buildup.
Wow. And you can even shoot it towards someone. I've never
Yep.
heard that before.
I could hold on to a certain amount of charge if I was doing everything correctly. I mean, you had a lot of gear on. You could build up a good charge.
Right.
And it's just like you become like a capacitor. And once that spark gap becomes the other person, you can instigate a lightning shot regularly. It was fun as hell. And it was really fun just to see people early in the morning actually walking over to get coffee, the stainless steel, the big commercial coffee bun setup, and people walking over all decrepit just trying to get their coffee. And usually the first thing that happens is they just get electrocuted when they touch the first metal surface. And you see them like they're just trying to get their coffee, and instead of like touching the plastic thing first, they'll like touch the counter, and they're like, and they're too tired to really react.
That'll wake you up.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's better than a cup of coffee. A little low voltage. Well, actually, high voltage, I guess.
See, because those are the little details that really amazed me. You learn about these things, especially when you're down there. There's so many things that aren't quite the way they are up north, and things happen in the natural world differently down there. It really is like a land of the lost.
It's bizarro world. A lot of things are just straight up backwards. They're not the way that you would think.
Yep.
So you have to look at things very differently. I found I think one of the coolest and most challenging things that I came across is just the idea that sometimes in the summer season, okay, the winter had its own challenges, but the summer season there were times where atmospheric conditions. If I was out walking on the ice, I could, if there weren't any buildings around, every single thing in every direction. I mean, it's not even just 360 degrees. Like imagine every direction, up, down, every direction is the exact same monotone color of white.
Wow.
There's no distinction. It's like in the Matrix, like when they go to like the white room. There's like certain atmospheric conditions in the summertime where it's like you can't tell. Like you can be looking at your feet. You could be looking at the ground. You can try to look up to find a horizon line. You can look up to the sky. Every direction, it's the exact same monotone thing going on.
That's trippy.
It was really trippy because you could stare at your own feet and you're trying to pick up your foot. Now you pick 1 foot up and you go to look to try to put it down and you can't even gauge where the ground is still. You're like, what is going on?
Wow.
Yeah, it's hard to walk sometimes when certain color conditions occurred.
And you mentioned the altitude and the difficulty in breathing too.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because it was so dry and no humidity in the air and the static electricity, or also the elevation, or a
Also,
combination of both?
the elevation. It's a total combination of all of the above.
Yeah.
It's challenging to identify which item is taxing you until you overexert yourself in one direction or another. You know, if you don't hydrate, I mean, we carried water with us constantly. Nalgene of water, you're always refilling it. We were trained that anytime we saw people stopping anything, like if they're standing around talking, like I get they're working, they're talking. I'm not negating that, but you pass people doing that and you just bark at them, drink water. That's what everybody's doing all the time, yelling at each other to drink more water, or you're going to pass the hell out. I mean, it's a hard environment.
Wow. Did that ever happen to you, or get close to it?
We call it the stupids. Yeah, absolutely. We would call it the stupids when you're just pushing yourself too far and you're getting dysfunctional, you're getting fatigued. I mean, you can go from feeling great to being dysfunctionally fatigued in minutes if you're not paying attention to everything at the South Pole. If your water levels are low, if you didn't eat enough calories, which is a huge thing. We would eat 12 to 15,000 calories a day and be losing weight.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Because the body is just in
The body's in
hyper
high
energy
speed
generation.
gear trying to sustain itself. When it has no oxygen and you keep pushing it, when it has no temperature, so your furnaces are just burning to produce calories to give your body heat. You know, your body starts to acclimate. It realizes that it's minus 60 degrees out. Yes, we put clothing on, but there's a lead and lag time on your warmth, and your body starts to learn, and it starts to pay attention. Like, hey, this idiot's going outside again. It's minus 90 degrees. I'm going to have to, fire up the furnaces, throw out some BTUs. He's probably going to take his gloves off and fix things. So your body starts to do what it needs to do, and you have to support your body in supporting you. And we were trained in all this stuff, and that, for us at South Pole, was at the meal table. We were trained on fueling that tank. We consumed. Our staff in the kitchen wasn't just simply preparing food. They had a mission. They had to prepare plates of food. I didn't eat 15,000 calories because I sat down and ate 10 plates of food. I would eat what I would think was a normal meal, but the chef had the task of hopping that stuff up. Like, that's part of his job. He has to make high caloric intake, tasty food with some of the worst ingredients on the planet.
Yeah.
I don't envy the job of the chefs at South Pole.
Well, what would they typically make? A lot of carbs, kind of thing, or?
We had some baking going on. We had an amazing baker. It's very hard to cook at those conditions as well, but we had a great baker. We had standard meals, I guess I would say, Brad, but you'd be surprised at how much calories they can bang into stuff, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, corn, gravy, that type of stuff. I mean, they would have spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread. I mean, anything that you could think of. They're extremely imaginative. The menu was diverse as diverse can be. We would have Taco Tuesday. We would have everything that you could think of. Burger Day, prime ribs, steaks. The food was diverse, There's no lack of options.
Well, except fresh fruit and vegetables.
Well, that's true. Yeah. We didn't have tons of that, but we did have a greenhouse, and we got some production out of it. It wasn't so much high volume. It was just to be supplementary, I guess you would say, so that we didn't go without.
Right.
We also did have, we really did have a massive amount of stored vegetables that were fresh, because we had whole birthing wings that were shut down for the winter season that we then used almost like a root cellar. We brought the temperatures down in them. We didn't leave them open to the elements temperatures-wise, but we certainly weren't, operating space temperatures. They weren't staffed. So we'd bring these temperatures down to like root cellar temperatures. And we did have, we had pumpkins and squash and things that you can keep long-term and, just like the old-fashioned days. So we did have freshies per se, not right off the vine. We wound up, one of my favorite things that we pulled off as a crew, we had fresh eggs the whole season, meaning like not out of a container.
So you had chickens?
Nope. Cracked open eggs that we were able to sustain the whole season because we are we broke some rules. Apparently, you can take eggs and wipe them with oil. You can lubricate the eggshell with oil, and it seals them. And it keeps the it keeps there's apparently like an oxygen barrier that if you don't do this, the egg will dry out and rot per se. But by oiling it, this is some old-fashioned trick. Puts an additional vapor barrier on it so the egg lasts longer. And we were told that we weren't allowed to do this because then I guess food health code regulations say that the dirt can acquire on the oil. And we were just like, damn it, we want fresh eggs, so we're going to try this. And it worked out great. So my entire season, my whole winter, I was able to go to the chow line and get 2 eggs over easy, bacon, toast, home fries. It was amazing.
That is amazing. Little Antarctica survival tips for all the listeners out there.
Yeah, oil your eggs; they last longer.
Well, we were big hits every time we went to a research station and they invited us in because we brought fresh fruits and vegetables. And the very first base we went to, Arktowski, they had brought in a professional chef because one of the biggest complaints about people living for months or even a year at base is just they don't like the food very much. So they brought in a professional chef. We brought in fresh fruits and vegetables. They invited us to dinner. We had an Indian dinner that was as good as any restaurant. It was really amazing. So there are creature comforts down there that are quite nice. But then I suspect it's kind of like the way people who live in Hawaii, which I did on Maui for 7 months, everybody said, well, after about 6 months, you're going to get island fever. I'm like, yeah, right. Maui's awesome. But then after a while, you think, gosh, where do I go? I've gone around the island enough times and I've done just about all the hikes I thought I was going to do. And sure enough, 6 months, I got island fever. So I can imagine you guys got base fever.
6 month mark. 6 month mark worked almost perfectly for me in this story. I would say I was on the ice for about 6 months, which put me right solidly in the middle of the winter season. And I was
where to go there?
Yeah, I was challenged, I guess you would say, at the time. I was in my year at South Pole, and I'm sure you can appreciate this from SSP conversations. My year at South Pole felt like 10 years to me. So it's a lot of curiosities and considerations that I have about it. But in the direct firsthand experience, there I was 6 months in, officially. But from my perspective, I was having trouble remembering things from off the ice. I was very much in the moment. And I was noticing this, and I started going like, wow, I've been here for 6 months, and I feel like I've been here forever. And then I started going, well, if I have 6 months to go, that just feels like I have forever to go before I get out of here then. I'm like, wow.
Counting your days backwards. How much longer do you have
yeah, big time. We had an amazing counter. We had this interesting counter that we had set up. Some of our science crew and mathematicians and physicists. This was actually one of my favorite things to check on. We had calculated because we were trying to present the reality of our situation, right? The last plane leaves, you're stuck at South Pole. For 8 months, no one's coming to help you. So we were trying to equate like time and space and distance to one formula. And what we did was we calculated that at the rate that a C-130 flies, the speed that it could go and the distance that it would travel in 8 months total. So we had figured out that distance, and we had a picture of a C-130, and we were chopping the distance down over the course of the season, like as if the plane was getting closer. And I forget what the number was when it started out. Whatever the Herc could fly in 8 months, it was some crazy, trillions of miles or whatever it was. And that's how we started out, trying to explain to people, like, this is how far away we are from reality. It's one thing to say, like, oh, we're 1,000 miles away and it's remote. Well, 1,000 miles away plus 8 months, it's a different level of remoteness. It's more like being 1,000,000 miles away from help.
So you really couldn't leave for 8 months, even if unless it was a medical emergency.
Not even at the time.
Hey, I want to quit. I want to leave. I want to go home. You couldn't even do that, right?
Our winter site manager was calling in for an evac of herself, and she was being denied.
Wow.
It made the news back in the day. It made the news. It was all over the place.
Guess you got to burn the base down if you really want to leave.
Well, this is why I said we were getting concerned and why she got drugged and taken and decommissioned.
Wow.
We were very concerned. Yes, I've heard stories, and I'm dead serious. It's a real environment. There's 48 other people that were very concerned about what was going on with her.
Do they have a brig there? I mean, did you have to detain her in some way?
I do believe that we could have gone that far. In the gymnasium, on the back end of the gymnasium, there's a room that's elevated. You can only get to it by like putting a ladder up to it, and it's this weird cage room. They have a lot of sporting equipment stored in there. And, as a maintenance guy, I go and I check all these things. In that room, I just looked at that room. I'm like, yeah, we got sporting equipment in here, but you could take all the sporting equipment out, put a ladder up, lock someone in here, and then they can't get out. This is apparently our jail, is what I always thought when I was there.
Wow.
But we didn't put her up there. Apparently, it was the chain of command's decision to dope her up with something, because she proceeded to just walk through the hallways with what I would call a 1,000-yard stare. She was present but not present.
Could you talk to her?
Yeah, but she wasn't coherent.
Not really there.
Yeah, she wasn't there.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Some people freak out. They can't handle it.
Yeah, she was having great difficulty with things, and she was actually degrading for a while, and I was, attempting to point it out. She was, I don't know how to put it. It was obvious that she was having difficulty with a lack of things to do, and she was getting involved in areas that she didn't need to get involved with, and to me, it was obvious for a while and unfortunate that other people didn't notice what I was noticing.
Yeah. Wow. Any temptation to go back? I know you were in Alaska. You kind of are a glut for this kind of cold punishment here. But
I really enjoy working in the cold. I like recreating in the warmth, but if I have to labor, I'd rather be doing it in subarctic temperatures.
Why?
It's because in the heat, right? Like, let's say we're digging ditches in Vegas, okay? And it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. There's only so much clothing you can take off, and you can only slow down so much before the boss shows up and says, "What are you doing laying on the ground naked doing nothing?"
Yeah.
But in the cold, I don't care how cold it is. You can put on more gear and you can work harder and you can keep going.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. I function well in the cold. I guess just through my experiences, I know it can be done. Like, for example, I do stuff up here in the Arctic regularly in remote camps, and I always find it funny because not everybody knows I've been to South Pole and blah, blah, blah. But I'll be on these job sites, and they'll be like, "Shut it down, pack it up. It's minus 40 degrees out. The equipment can't take it." And I'm like, "Trust me, we can keep doing this. Let's just get this done. Come on now."
Well, you got thick skin, man.
Yeah, I'm
going back for it. Plus, you get a pay premium, I'm sure, for working in really harsh climates.
Up here in the Alaska area. The pay is great. Down in Antarctica, the pay is terrible. There's too many people that want to go to Antarctica that try to get into these programs. I mean, you'll have big-witted PhD doctors and stuff that are, mopping floors in Antarctica because that's the only gig they can get. They'll take whatever they can get.
They told me at Palmer that all the Americans working there were getting paid through the National Science Foundation, not directly, but through these subcontractors who hired them.
Yes.
But the real money comes from NSF, and then it goes to these. Was that the same situation with you guys?
Absolutely, 100%. The money is a check cut from Congress, goes to the NSF. The NSF cut a check at the time for my employment, went to Raytheon Polar Services. They lost the contract, so now that company is no longer present. until they get another contract. I'm sure it'll show back up again. But then Lockheed Martin got the next contract, and they've been holding on to it ever since. And I believe they subbed out a large portion of that to PAE.
And now, isn't that interesting? Raytheon and Lockheed Martin,
Yep.
these big aerospace companies, why do they have an interest in Antarctica?
Apparently, you need to hire military industrial contractors to be in charge of the operations and maintenance and janitorial and cooking at a remote facility, which blows my mind. I think it's completely, I think it's a joke beyond jokes. I've worked up here up north. There's plenty of companies that don't make weapons that are good at plumbing and cooking. They just lack the missile making skills. Apparently, you have to be able to be involved with radar systems and missile technology to be in charge of mopping the floors at South Pole Station. If you want to get that contract, you can't just be a deck swabby. You got to have some missile techs handy. Some intergalactic comms guys.
You are a scientific plumber there, Eric. So,
Yeah.
You had some smarts up here when it comes to
that kind of work. I'm pretty good at plumbing, and I'm a little bit well-rounded in other topics too, but I think it just has to do with the path that I've walked on, the facilities that I worked at before South Pole. I was over in the New York area, and there's a lot going on Long Island. So I think I was just very blessed that I worked for certain companies that got me into great facilities, and I had the background to move forwards to get into the shenanigans that was South Pole. I mean, at the time, Brad, I think I didn't really think much of it. I just looked at it as another job. But in hindsight, I guess I'm starting to realize how big of a deal it was, the doors that I went through.
Yeah. Well, some of your stories you were telling me about Brookhaven and growing up on Long Island and Montauk, man, you've got quite a resume of paranormal and weird stuff in your life, Eric.
Yeah, that's why I started the show, Deciphering My Experience, because folks started telling me, like, man, you got to write a book. You got like this Forrest Gump life. You've been here, you've done this. Like, what does it all mean? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, what does it all mean? I don't know. I have to figure this out, I guess. So instead of writing a book, I just went straight to like real-time deciphering. It was like, all right, everybody, come along for a ride. I'm gonna decipher my experience in real time, and I'm just gonna set up a studio and try to connect with folks like Brad here that have seen things, heard things, have been looking into things, connecting the dots, and I'm loving the direction that this is all going, because I mean, when I went to Antarctica, I was just looking to pay bills. I had no idea what this was going to turn out to be. I didn't think that I had walked a weird path yet. And it was only when I got up here to Alaska and the weird job sites continued. And I follow folks like you and these stories. I'm interested in all kinds of topics. But then it just got to this point where I was like, damn it. Somehow I'm involved with this stuff. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I got to do some research.
Well, how do you even spend money in Antarctica? Just in the gift store?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. You would get
all you're doing is saving, really. I mean,
yes.
You can't really, because they pay for your lodging and food and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, I was just sending money home to cover bills and expenditures and stuff like that. But for all practical purposes, I was just taking a small portion of my paycheck to buy booze and cigarettes at the time. I mean, they provided everything else. I had a little bit of money on me, to get like things like T-shirts and hats and paraphernalia and things, but not much. I earned money flipping booze on the back end of the season because I had gotten advice from a previous winter over person. He had told me that by the end of the season, he said all of the cheap liquor will be gone, just the expensive stuff will be left. He said to load up, and I did. It was great advice. I was the guy with the stockpile at the end of the season I was now making money.
Like the guy, the prisoner that has a pack of smokes and sells the individual cigarettes.
Yep. Black
really
Velvet Canadian whiskey was $10 a bottle at the start of the season. When you got it from the company store, it was $20 a bottle at the end of the season when you got it from me.
Now, where could you go for a cigarette? Did they make you
Destination Zulu, DZ, as we called it. DA, which was Destination Alpha, was the main entry point, where was the skiway side of the building where people would show up and arrive. Destination Zulu was kind of like the back door of the elevated station, where it was more utility of going in and out and going out to the summer camp area and some of the other outbuildings. So DZ was pretty much the smoke pit. And you would just step outside, just big, huge freezer door. You'd walk outside and have a smoke. There was also at the bottom of the beer can, they had what we call it was called the Naked Lady Shack, and it was because there was a puzzle from like the 1970s, like a giant, like 6 foot by 4 foot puzzle. Maybe not that big, maybe 3 by 4, but it was a puzzle of a naked lady, like a Playboy shot, like from a Playboy magazine in the 70s that someone made into a puzzle and put all the puzzle pieces together. And this thing was up on the wall in a heated smoke shack. So if people wanted to like congregate as smokers, they could walk down to the bottom of the beer can, step outside and go into the Naked Lady. And that was a winter season smoke shack.
Well, because you were saying you can't even go outside and have any part of your body exposed, even your lips, if you were to have a cigarette. So
you could actually. It's
really?
Yes, there's different levels of acclimation. So I would agree with you. Most people that I was there with could not do that. Most people that I was there with were nowhere near the exterior exposure that I was going through. I was outside a lot every day of the year, a lot. So I could go outside. My standard interior outfit was I had a base layer underneath a pair of good pants. I had a base layer underneath a t-shirt. I had a hat that I would keep in my back pocket, and I had a pair of glove liners that I would keep in a back pocket. I went everywhere dressed like that. I could throw on just a beanie cap and my glove liners dressed like that, and I could dip outside and take care of business for a few minutes doing anything. If it's just a few minutes, if it was minus 90, I could pull that off. And smoke breaks, I would just simply throw my hat on and go outside. I would be gloveless. The DZ spot would block the wind, so it didn't matter the wind. You were in kind of a vacuum right there, so you didn't have to deal with any of that. And you could go outside, have a cigarette, dressed like that. I could pull that off. My face would be wide open, my neck and everything, just have a cigarette. But in reality, we also smoked differently at South Pole, okay? So when you went outside, I'd go outside with my buddy Ron. I'd call him on the radio, and I would say, code SDZ. And that meant smoke break at Destination Zulu. So he would meet me at DZ, and we would step outside. You would light your cigarette, and you'd be smoking. You didn't stop. It's not like a standard casual conversation where you're smoking and you chill out. You kept and you would have your cigarette. You would keep talking, but you weren't screwing around. Like you could do this, but it was expedited.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So when you're breathing out all the steam and the smoke coming out too, it's
yes.
freezing instantly.
Yes, it condenses very fast. At minus 80 degrees, there's a lot of things that are different levels at South Pole. We would jokingly say that, minus 60 is twice as bad as minus 50, minus 70 is twice as bad as minus 60, minus 80 is the same thing, right? But when you get to minus 80, something weird happens in the atmosphere and the pressures or whatever you want to call it. At minus 80, you have to try harder to get the air out of your lungs. You start to expel more. Your gases start to condense faster, so it's almost like backing up. So it becomes more mechanical, more of an effort to converse, because it's like you're talking, and it's also blinding. So it's like you're talking, and this stuff is coming out, and you're like trying to move to see the person that you're talking to, and you're like, so the other day I was blah, 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 and you're like, it's like it gets hard.
Do you guys ever do any super cold weather experiments, like get boiling water and throw it in the air and it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just goes to nothing. It's just instantaneously, poof, it just disappears. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And sublimation, I thought, was fantastic. So in the 0% humidity environment, you can just take a chunk of ice from the outside and you could just stick it on the floor inside. It'll never make a puddle. It sublimates.
Whoa.
It'll never make a puddle. It sublimates 100% right before your eyes. It just goes from solid to gas. It skips liquid.
Is that because of the lack of humidity that
Yep.
it just evaporates?
Yep. It just instantaneously evaporates. It skips the liquid part. It can evaporate so fast.
You see, I knew this would be an interesting talk, Eric. It's these little details that you only really pick up if you're there.
Yeah. I mean, how many people get into sublimation talk?
Now, we only had one day when we were down there that there was any precipitation. It snowed on our boat, a couple inches, but it was cool to see. Did you ever get any blizzards or any kind of snow events?
We had a lot of blowing snow. So it wasn't precipitating, it wasn't dropping, but snow events, yes, absolutely. We had everything from crystal clear days to blinding whiteout conditions where I couldn't see from my knees down. Like that's like I couldn't, if I put my arms out, I don't think I would have seen my hands at the end of my arm. I couldn't see the ground below my knees. There were times where I came close to getting lost in some very harsh conditions. One of the more taxing moments in my life was one time when I got lost going out to what we commonly call the dark sector, which was a radio silence zone out towards the South Pole telescope. And we had really harsh whiteout conditions, blowing wind, and I'd been there a while, actually, and was very comfortable with the elements. I was told that it was harsh out, and when I went to go exit out of destination Alpha, I went to go push the freezer door, and I was blasting into it, and it wasn't moving. And I was thinking to myself, like, damn it, the heat trace must have went out, and that we would heat trace the door seam. It's actually, the door seam is warmed, otherwise it'll freeze up and lock up. So I thought the heat trace went out and the door was stuck, but I was wrong. It turned out the wind was blowing so hard it was just keeping the door shut.
Wow. You told that story in your, maybe it was the Q&A where you got lost out in a blizzard.
Oh, this is that one.
Really disorientated. Oh,
this is the one. So this door, I couldn't even get the door open. And then when I wound up getting outside, my first thought was, this is a lot worse than I was expecting. Maybe I should put some more gear on. And then I was like, I'll be all right. I'm just going to run out to the dark sector real fast. And then we had a flag line up where the flags are mounted 8 feet on center. And I assure you that the split second I stepped away from one flag, I lost sight of both the flag that I was at and the next one coming. That's how hard it was blowing. It was harsh wind coming from my right side at the time, which would have been grid north as we called it. So I was like really leaning into the right side, like trying to bear down to fight the wind from blowing me too far to the left. In that process, I kept screwing everything up. I thought that I was getting blown to the left, which would have been fine because that gets me into summer camp and at least there's buildings and I can catch something and reorient. But what was really going on is I was overcompensating towards grid north where there's nothing. And if I kept messing that one up, I would just get lost. And I kept screwing up, and then I would get a glimpse somehow through the blowing snow. I'd get a glimpse of one of the red flags blowing in the wind, and I would see that I was way off from where I thought I was. And I'd have to keep making corrections. And on that day, I was really questioning whether I was going to screw something up badly. And I was getting my radio ready to make an emergency call. And that usually or an emergency situation, I should say. I started taking it, putting it to the interior, letting it get back to a warm spot. Now I'm getting concerned about battery function and longevity. So it's, things are getting real. So I start stowing my radio, getting prepped to make my emergency call, which is, I would tell people lots of times when I'd be walking around outside, I just spent most of my time rewriting my emergency call, in case things went wrong. How far am I from this building? How long have I been outside? What was the bearing that I was at? Where was I headed? That type of stuff. So I just started stowing my radio and working on my emergency call because I was not looking forward to it, but I wound up getting back on the flag line and pulling it off. So I didn't have to make the call.
You carry, there's a rope, right? Wasn't that how you're describing it?
There was not a rope. It was it's a flag line. So it's a flag every 8 feet, but there's not a rope connecting them.
Oh, so it's all visual then.
And actually audio too. You'd be surprised, the flags, the flapping in the wind. You'd be surprised how much you can hear that. So it is audio as well. So you can deviate from the flag line visually to do things, and you can get an audible off of the flag line up to certain conditions. If it gets really hairy out there, then the storm will overpower the noises of flags as well. And on that day, I was not getting flag noise. So it was a hard day. They don't use the ropes typically because the heavy equipment can't see it and it'll get tangled up. And everywhere you put a flag line, you're now preventing heavy equipment from moving through. I'm sorry, a rope line. I'm sorry, I meant a rope line. There was one time in the summer season, they put a rope line up from the elevated station out to summer camp because we had a storm that was ruthless and a lot of newbies were around, which was myself at the time. I was very new. They called it, I think it was Death Claw was the name of the storm is titled because of the way it looked on the charts. It looked like this crazy claw or something like that. So they called it Death Claw. And during Death Claw, we had a rope line set up, and we were like more or less dragging ourselves to camp. It was pretty rough. I was a rookie at the time.
Not for long. You pretty much are a seasoned veteran now.
Yeah, but there's a lot of folks now talking about going back and doing expeditions and things like that in a private capacity. And you know something? I think I would be interested in stuff like that, you know, to go back there and, you know, I'd be interested to see what a private venture could accomplish. Because as you know, a lot of people have been saying for years that it's off limits and no one's allowed to go. And that's just wholly not true.
Not true.
It's not true. So I'd like to get beyond this mindset and find people that realize we can do this. And how do we do this? You know, I'm very we the people for the people, and I'm into disclosing the truth. So to me, we got to get all these middlemen out of the conversation on the ice. You know, we the people can go down there.
There's you, baby.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
Yeah, this is a group that does chartered expeditions to Antarctica.
I feel like I know the dude in that photo. That looks like a Sundog shot of this dude, Eric, I know. That's not me, different Eric.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a great shot. That's a Sundog.
Sundog, yeah.
Yeah, so you see the two dots on the side of the ring there? That's the start of a Sundog. I've seen these as well, too. There's atmospheric conditions that happen with the ice and the sun that circle and those points will then continue outward, and more circles and more points show up in the sky and start creating a pattern that looks like the flower of life.
Wow.
Right in the air.
With these guys,
yeah, that's a Ken Boric. That's a Ken Boric plane in the picture. That's a Twin Otter from Ken Boric.
That's how you flew down there?
That's not how I got down there, but those are an operating contractor.
Experience Antarctica. Here's your plane.
There you go.
Transport guys.
Nope, that's Ken Boric on the top right. That's that almost looks like a Russian plane or something. But on the left side, that was I think a DC-9, which is still Ken Boric, or DC-3. Those guys are basically the crew that go in and out of Pole regularly. They have orange planes. There you go. Ta-da.
Hey, you can see the Palmer Peninsula where I was. And then also below Palmer is the Union Glacier. Actually, it's not on the... Oh, yeah, Union Glacier. That is where they just had the full solar eclipse. And I saw a picture of people at Union Glacier. That is the stopover point for flying in from Punta Arenas, Chile, where most of the flight traffic into Antarctica for this kind of thing, for tourism, going down there. So this group, Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, ALE, they do chartered trips. And I said, look, maybe I want to go to New Schwabenland, or maybe I want to check out some of these pyramids in the Shackleton Range. And they said, oh, yeah, well, we know about that. We can get you there. And they say they fly over this one all the time on their way to Union Glacier. And I said, well, did you ever check it out? Go climb it or explore it or take a sample? They're like, no, we just fly over it. They call it a nunatak, which is a attractive mountain sticking through the ice. But
I feel like I've seen that word up here in Native Alaskan tongue.
You know, it sounds like
It sounds like Native Alaskan tongue.
Word. Yeah,
yeah, nunatak. I feel like I've seen that on maps up here.
Yeah,
interesting. I flew from McMurdo to South Pole in a C-130, and I was fortunate enough to be in the cockpit for takeoff and a large portion of the flight. And flying over Antarctica was one of the most mind-numbing things to see how remote stuff can be.
And you're like, what have I gotten myself into?
It was freaky, actually, because I mean, we were trained for if the plane went down, but in reality, I mean, when you're flying over that area, I mean, it's obvious. If we go down, that's it. There's no one coming to help you. It's a done deal.
Not for days or a week, at least.
No one's ever been rescued from a plane crash in Antarctica.
That's right. or stayed alive long enough. Did you see the Trans-Antarctic Mountains though? Was it clear enough day when you're flying over?
Yeah. We had a crisp, clear day. I saw every bit of everything. Everything between McMurdo and South Pole, I saw every bit of it.
Wow.
Yep. We had windows.
Cool.
I had someone challenge me recently, which I thought was really interesting. They were like, trying to call me out as a liar and stuff like that. And they're like, "You're a liar. You don't have pictures, blah, blah, blah. You didn't get to see anything. The plane that you were on doesn't even have windows and blah." And I was like, "Okay, well, cool. But I have pictures from the plane that I was on because it does have windows. So you're wrong."
It's funny how people just want to throw you off
And that's what's interesting to me in this whole paradigm is that I'm really happy to be in this fight because I didn't realize until I got my hands in the mix that there's that much disinformationists out there. So to me, in a way, I'm happy to lock horns. I'm happy to do it because I have the facts and people can't mess with my truth. So
and that's what I really respect about you too, Eric, because I was asking you questions. If you didn't know the answer, you just said, "Well, I don't know, but there's a probability that it could exist." Speaking of the hole under the ice or other kind of shenanigans down there.
I believe in all of these things, but I'm trying to work on what I can prove.
Right.
Because I'm concerned that some people are painting pictures just for painting pictures' sake. Because there's a COINTEL faction out there for every topic.
Well, there is. And you said that the NSA is present down at Pole, and I was telling you about this building at McMurdo that's unmarked and unmanned, and only what I've heard, only NSA can gain access to
Interesting. Well, that's actually awesome. I think I was just noticing at the clock though too. I think we might have to leave these further mysteries for the next conversation because that building that you're mentioning is very intriguing to me. And I only recently, through looking at other maps on my side, came across a spot out by the South Pole that I hadn't gone to that I think we had facilities at. So we'll have to save that one for next time, Brad. And I really appreciate the time that we had in Vegas and the time that we chatted here today. And thank you very much for your time. And I hope that I could have you back on in the future.
Oh, you know it, Eric. And boy, we didn't even get into Long Island and Montauk stuff. And
yeah, you have so much other stuff that we can connect to.
And as you know, I came out with my new book since I've been in Antarctica, Escaping Prison Planet, which I have a lot of my Antarctica research in here, and
great photos.
Other weird stuff like the black goo, which is found off an island in Antarctica. So let's let that be a setup for the next time.
Yes, I want to talk to you about black goo as well because I think I came across it in the Arctic.
Ooh.
So we'll have to discuss that one. Correct. Yep. Awesome. Well, everybody, please like, subscribe, share, buy Brad's book, go to the website, check out CCC Publishing and everything that they're doing. I did get that right, correct? It's CCC?
Publishing.com, yeah.
CCCpublishing.com. Please check out everything that Brad is doing. He's working hard to get the truth out there and make connections, and that's what we need right now because it's certainly not going to come from the mass media. So it's we the people, for the people. We have to make this happen and get the truth out there. Brad, thanks a lot for coming here today. Have an awesome time.
Thanks so much, Eric. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.